I bought a small vacation mobile home about 2 months ago. It is honestly nothing fancy at all. Just a run-down little place with 2 tiny bedrooms, a small living room, a basic kitchen, and 1 bathroom. It is not meant to impress anyone. It is just supposed to be a quiet escape from the city, somewhere I can go alone to clear my head, or maybe bring a future girlfriend if that ever happens. The property itself is about 2 acres, which is one of the reasons I loved it. It feels open and peaceful. Another big selling point is that it is only about 10 minutes away from a mountain where I like to go snowboarding a few times each year. That convenience alone made it feel worth it. The first time I went up there after buying it, my family came with me to help set the place up. We spent the whole weekend decorating and furnishing it. We went to a local furniture outlet nearby and picked out a couple of couches and a few other essentials. Luckily, my dad has a pickup truck, so hauling everything back and forth was not too bad. We managed to get most of it done in just one weekend. During all that activity, I guess the closest neighbor noticed the commotion. He walked over and introduced himself as Dale. He was exactly what you might picture as someone who has lived out there for years. He had a thick Hudson Valley accent, and the way he talked and carried himself felt very different from what we are used to as people from the city. Still, at first he seemed friendly enough. We all introduced ourselves, though I knew I would be the one who really needed to have some kind of relationship with him, since this was now my place. After chatting for a while, we went back to unloading furniture. He kind of lingered nearby, watching us move things in. My dad kept trying to include him in conversation here and there. Eventually, Dale said goodbye and walked back up the road to his own mobile home. That Sunday, we all left together. I did not return until about 2 weeks later. This time, I went alone to bring up more personal items, like my snowboarding gear, and to get the Wi-Fi set up. Not long after I arrived, there was a knock on the open door. It was Dale. He stepped right inside as he greeted me. I smiled and told him to come in, though technically he already had. He complimented how the place was coming along, and after a bit of small talk, he invited me over to his place for a beer. I figured why not, so I followed him up the road to his home, which was also a mobile home, slightly bigger than mine. We sat outside on his deck. He went inside and brought out a Heineken for me, then sat across the table. I tried to make conversation and asked how long he had lived there. He replied, 20 years too long. I laughed a little, unsure if he was joking. I asked a few more questions and got similar pessimistic but half-joking answers. That pretty much set the mood. Then he started asking me questions. What brought me there? Exactly where I was from. Things he had not asked when my family was around. I told him I was from Queens and that I bought the place as a getaway and for snowboarding. He did not seem to like that. Almost immediately, he launched into a rant about how people from the city are coming in and ruining everything, polluting the area, and leaving trash behind. What started as a discussion quickly turned into something more intense. I tried to explain that not everyone from the city behaves that way, and that I just wanted a quiet place to relax. But he kept getting louder, ripping his half-empty beer, his accent getting thicker as his temper rose. At one point, he said straight out, I do not know why you all cannot just stay where you belong. That was when I decided the conversation was over. I stood up, forced a smile, and said I think I am going to head back now. Thanks for the beer. He did not respond at first. He just stared down at his drink. As I was walking away, maybe about 100 feet from his deck, he suddenly yelled out that he was sorry. I turned around and gave him a thumbs up, trying to keep things neutral. But inside, I was shaken. I kept telling myself that maybe 20 years of living out there alone had affected him, that maybe he just was not used to dealing with new people. I tried to excuse his behavior that way. That night, I was lying on a mattress on the floor, watching a movie on my laptop. Out of nowhere, I heard a voice outside. It sounded like someone muttering to themselves, swearing under their breath. I went to the window, but it was pitch dark. The property is mostly woods, and hearing a voice out there with no one visible made my stomach drop. The next day around midday, there was another knock. I heard Dale calling my name. I did not want to deal with him again, so I stayed quiet in the bedroom. He knocked for what felt like 5 straight minutes. Then he said, "I know you are in there. Your car is here." That sent a chill through me. It felt obsessive and unsettling. Eventually, he stopped knocking. Or at least I thought he did. For the rest of the day, I felt uncomfortable even stepping outside, worried he might be somewhere nearby, watching to see if I would come out. After dinner that evening, I started watching another movie, this time on the television through my phone. For the second night in a row, I heard a voice outside, even over the sound of the TV. I turned it off and went to look. I could not see anything from inside, so I stepped onto the deck and flipped on the light. That is when I saw him. Dale was standing just a few feet into the woods, arms straight at his sides. For a split second he froze in the light, then he turned and ran deeper into the trees. I went back inside immediately and seriously thought about calling 911. Instead, I called my dad. He told me to hold off for now, saying that once you call the cops on your neighbor in a place like that, it changes everything. I tried to lie down and sleep, planning to leave the next day and not return for at least a month. About an hour later, I heard him again. This time he was shouting. I heard him yell in an angry voice, "City piece of shit, I know you are in there, leave. Nobody wants you here." He sounded drunk and furious. That was the moment it really hit me that something was not right with him. It also crossed my mind that maybe this neighbor was the reason I managed to buy the place at such a good price. The next morning, I packed up anything valuable and drove back home. I have not returned since. The next time I go, it definitely will not be alone. If his behavior continues, I will have no choice but to call the police. Right now, I honestly do not know what the best move is. Part of me is already thinking about selling the place if this keeps happening, because at the moment, I am genuinely scared to go back there by myself. When I was about 7 years old, my family lived in a pretty rough neighborhood. It was the kind of place where you stayed alert and did not fully trust anyone. Even the neighbor on one side of us gave off a strange vibe and was never friendly. I barely remember this incident myself because I was so young, but my mom remembers every detail clearly. That is probably what makes it so unsettling. It happened on what seemed like a completely ordinary night. It was just my mom, my 2 siblings, and me at home. My dad was away on a business trip, which was not unusual. Late that night, sometime around midnight, someone started knocking on our front door. The sound woke my mom up. She walked to the door and asked who was there. There was no response at all. She figured maybe it was some kids playing a prank and running off after knocking. So she went back to bed, thinking it was nothing serious. About half an hour later, the knocking started again. This time she got up and looked through the small side window near the door to see if she could catch anyone outside. There was no one there. In a different neighborhood, you might just assume it was kids messing around. But where we lived, you never assumed innocence. You assumed danger. My mom started to feel uneasy. She went back to her bedroom, grabbed my dad's shotgun, and then sat quietly in the dark living room, waiting. Through all of this, she did not wake any of us. We were all very young, and she did not want to scare us unless it was absolutely necessary. Then once again, while she was sitting there in the dark, the knocking started up. She stood and looked through the window again, expecting to finally see someone, but still there was nobody in sight. At that point, my mom yelled through the door that she was calling the police and that if anyone tried to break in, she would shoot. It was not an empty warning. Apparently, that was enough to stop it, because the knocking never happened again that night. Sometime after that, and before the police arrived, my mom decided to wake us up just in case things took a turn for the worse. Around 2 in the morning, officers finally showed up. They searched the outside of the house while we waited inside. After a short time, they came back in and asked my mom if a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long belonged to her. She said it did not, and asked why they were asking. One of the officers explained that it likely belonged to whoever had been knocking. They believed the person may have intended to use it to strangle my mom if she had opened the door to see who was there. They told her she was very smart not to open it, because it could have cost her life. They said they would patrol the neighborhood until morning and return in daylight to investigate more thoroughly. The next morning, while searching around the property, they found footprints that led around the side of the house toward the back. The tracks went right up to my bedroom window. They also discovered marks and small gouges on the windowsill, signs that someone had tried to pry the window open but failed. My mom always suspected it was that creepy neighbor. There had been several times when she caught him staring into our house through his curtains. He was always unfriendly and gave off a disturbing presence. He also paid close attention to our routines. He knew what vehicle my dad drove, so he would easily notice when it was not parked outside and realize my dad was away. Not long after that terrifying experience, we moved out of that neighborhood. Thankfully, we never had to deal with anything like that again. A new neighbor moved in next door not too long ago, and at first I was totally fine with it. We never really clicked with the previous neighbors anyway. Now, though, I actually find myself missing them. A few months ago, we noticed a van parked in the driveway next door. What stood out was that there were no moving trucks, no delivery vans, nothing that suggested someone was properly moving in. We never saw anyone carrying furniture inside or unloading boxes. It all felt strangely quiet. Trying to be welcoming, my wife and I walked over and knocked on the door to introduce ourselves. No one answered. The van was sitting right there in the driveway, which made it even stranger. We brushed it off, assuming maybe they were showering or asleep. Our bedroom is upstairs, and from one of our windows, we have a clear view of the neighbor's backyard. The house next door has a detached garage behind it. One evening, after not seeing the van around all day, my wife and I were in bed reading when we suddenly heard the garage door next door rumble open. Of course, we were curious. We adjusted the blinds just enough to peek outside. There he was, a middle-aged man wearing a white shirt and jeans. The motion light above the garage had switched on, which is how we got a good look at him. He was carrying boxes from the van into the garage. After a minute, we stepped away from the window because we did not want to feel like we were spying too much. A few days passed, and again the van was gone most of the time. Then one night, we heard the garage door open once more. That same night, every now and then, we could hear strange scraping noises coming from inside his garage. There were occasional bangs too, probably from boxes being dropped. But what did not make sense was the steady metallic scraping that kept going on and on. I went back to the window to look. This time, he looked up and caught me watching. We locked eyes for a split second, and I instantly felt uncomfortable. I stepped away from the window, and just moments later, I heard the garage door slam shut. I told my wife I was going to go outside and say hello. I figured that was the only way to smooth over how awkward that must have looked. I threw on some shorts and a shirt and walked over to his driveway. He was already inside his van with the engine running. When he noticed me coming over, he quickly reversed out of the driveway and sped off down the street. The whole thing felt off. I got the sense that he was now actively avoiding us. At that point, my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know what was causing all that scraping noise in his garage. I walked around into his backyard and approached the garage door. I could still hear something moving inside. There were faint thumping sounds. It honestly sounded like there was some kind of animal in there. Just then, My wife called my name from our bedroom window, asking what I was doing. I looked up at her and put my finger to my lips to signal her to be quiet. I tried the garage door, but it was locked. That was enough snooping for one night. I went back home and returned to bed. Later that night, my wife shook me awake. She whispered that she thought she heard our backyard gate open. I told her to stop scaring me, but she insisted she was certain. So I did what I felt I had to do and went to check. First, I looked out the upstairs window. The neighbor's yard lights were off, and our backyard was too dark to see much. I went downstairs and checked through the front door. The van was back in his driveway. He was home. I headed into our backyard and flipped on the lights. The moment they came on, I heard someone running along the side of the house. Then the backyard gate slammed shut. My heart dropped, but instead of freezing, I got angry and chased after whoever it was. I ran to the gate, then around to the front of the house and out into the street. There was no one there. I was alone, yet I felt like I was being watched from somewhere in the darkness. Eventually, I went back inside. I told my wife someone had definitely been in our yard, but I had not seen who it was. She asked if I thought it was the neighbor. I told her I had no idea. The next day, I walked over to Gene, the neighbor 2 houses down, and asked if he had met the new guy. He said he had not, but he had been waking up to strange noises late at night, coming from that garage. I told him about someone sneaking into our yard. He agreed it was seriously disturbing. We decided that the next time we heard anything unusual, we would text each other and go over together to finally introduce ourselves properly. The following day was Saturday. While opening the living room blinds that morning, I noticed the van was actually in the driveway during the day for once. Then I glanced toward one of his windows. He was standing there, completely still, staring directly at me like he had been waiting. I expected him to look away, but he did not. We held eye contact for about 20 seconds straight. I gave him a small wave, because I did not know what else to do. He did not wave back or even change his expression. I called for my wife and told her to come look. By the time she got there, he had stepped away from the window. At that point, I had had enough. My wife and I walked next door again and knocked firmly, even ringing the doorbell. I heard a loud slam from inside, but he never answered. Frustrated, I went back to Gene's house. When he opened the door, he asked if I had seen his messages. I had not brought my phone with me. He told me that the previous night he heard what sounded like muffled crying coming from the direction of the new neighbor's place and had tried to text me about it. Gene came with me to knock on the door again. Once more, no response. By then, everyone, including Gene's wife and mine, agreed that something was seriously wrong. The next day, the van was gone again. It has been almost 2 weeks now, and it has not returned. We have no idea where he went or if he is coming back. Lately, either my wife or I wake up during the night thinking we hear noises outside. Every time we check the window to see if the van is in the driveway, it is not there. It is strange that none of us even know his name, yet we are all trying to piece together what was happening. One night I heard something clearly alive moving inside that garage. Another night, Gene heard what sounded like quiet crying. Most likely he will show up again eventually, but none of us are looking forward to that. For our own peace of mind, we have even talked about anonymously reporting him.